Good evening, Whakaala Flahiatu, and welcome to our bulletin of BCN News for tonight. Leading the news tonight, Premier Dalton Tangilanghi announced at the Whanokepule yesterday Cabinet's decision to resume passenger flights on Monday the 18th of October. This was done after consultations with health advisors from both New Zealand and Niue's health departments, including Dr. Colin Tukuitonga. The Premier said that Cabinet is working closely with the health advisors from both the Ministry of Health in New Zealand and Niue, and also with Dr. Colin Tukuitonga to provide the necessary advice as to the conditions and the requirements when the passenger flights resume. There will be a maximum of 20 passengers allowed on this flight if there are children, and they will all be quarantined at the Matawai apartments at Homofisi. Premier Dalton Tangilanghi told the Whanokepule that we have to adapt to the new normal, because if we were to wait until there are 0 cases in New Zealand, then that may very well go into next year. Dr. Colin Tukuitonga told BCN News that he had been in meetings with the government of Niue and he supports the decision to resume passenger flights, provided that strict conditions are enforced.
The issue for them is what happens here in New Zealand, because that's where the risk will come from. There's still ongoing transmission, 45 cases yesterday, 19 today. And in other words, this long tail that people talk about will roll on for a while, and it presents a level of risk to Niue because the flight obviously originates here in Auckland. And so my recommendations were that they insist on people who come up. I understood that there's some pressure to get essential workers back on island and selected family who'd been away and all of that. And so I understood that, and I suggested that there were some things that needed to happen, the most important of which was to insist on anyone coming up to be fully vaccinated. In other words, to have had 2 doses, not 1, both doses. Secondly, that they should be required to show a negative test within 3 days. This was something that they had been considering anyway, before arrival, that they would agree to abide by public health measures of Niue, a test on arrival, and a test on day 5, I think it was. In other words, to subject to further tests, to follow the public health advice of the people in Niue. In other words, I thought if they adopted those things, that the risk is not 0, but the risk will be less or lower.
Dr. Tukuitonga says that vaccinating a large portion of the local population, including children, is the best way to minimize or reduce the risk in Niue, but it won't eliminate the possibility of an outbreak. He is also encouraging parents to send through their consent forms for their 12 to 15-year-old teenagers to be vaccinated this coming Friday, October 8th.
The risk to children is still from adults. And given that you vaccinated almost 100% of your adult eligible population, I think the risk to children is pretty low. Vaccinating children is important, not so much for the welfare and well-being of the children themselves, but because it reduces your transmission even more. In other words, if you vaccinate all your 12 to 15-year-olds and you've already got good coverage of your adult population, you won't eliminate an outbreak, but you reduce the likelihood of it, and you reduce the number of very sick people. In other words, if you get the vaccine, there's still a small chance of what are called breakthrough cases occurring in people who are fully vaccinated, but they're not that sick and they're not likely to go to hospital and all of that. So I think if you vaccinate your 12 to 15-year-olds and adopt the measures we talked about, the risk to Niue will be small. The issue of children under 5 is a work in progress. There are trials underway, as I say, I know of at least one in California, and the results are looking good. But it's a bit early to know what we should do for children under 5. There's no vaccination here for children under 5 yet.
It's understood that today Niue High School had received over 50 signed consent forms. According to the Statistics Department, there are 141 children in this age group. The Health Department are waiting on the final number of consent forms so they can send through the order for the vaccines to arrive on Monday next week. The Immigration Health Emergencies Amendment Bill, issued under a certificate of urgency to the Whanokepule yesterday, was passed unanimously by the whānau. The bill was presented by the Minister of Finance and Immigration, Honourable Crossley Tatui. There are three key amendments to the principal immigration law. Firstly, the amendments will strengthen the authority of the government to impose restrictions on incoming passengers to Niue during situations such as pandemics like what is happening right now. These new changes will ensure that New Zealand Niueans will have to abide by these requirements if they are to be allowed to travel to Niue. Secondly, the amendments provides for the Chief Immigration Officer the authority to share information with their counterparts in New Zealand on immigration matters. And the third new part to the principal immigration law is to allow Cabinet to make further regulations on travel to Niue, such as to comply with COVID restrictions. Among the stranded passengers in Auckland in New Zealand right now are 4 local politicians, including Common Role member Honourable Olaf Jacobson, who says that they are grateful for the continued assistance through the provision or the continuation of their salaries while they wait to find out when they can return home. But she did say that they would like to be kept informed on a regular basis as to what is happening. Here's more. Some of these passengers say that while they are stranded passengers in New Zealand and waiting patiently to return to Niue, they still do need to know what is happening and what they need to do to prepare for their return home. BCN News spoke with one of these passengers, Honourable Olaf Jacobson, via Zoom yesterday afternoon.
I think it would be nice if on a weekly basis we could just be kept posted. I'm sure we have very intelligent people that are working for government that could send out these things, and they send out electronically. There's only a few of us dinosaurs in Jurassic Park that are still running around that are not, that well equipped, but at least it could be sent out to say, hey, this is where we're at now. You can expect this, but it'll still be subject to whatever goes on at that end there in New Zealand. That to me is the only issue I have, is the issue of keeping us connected with what's going on at home, especially where it pertains to those of us that work for government, because we're grateful. And I think I need to say this and say this very loud and clear. We're grateful for the assistance that have been received in terms of our salary being paid to us while we're still here. Without that, I think it would be a huge load on our families here in New Zealand to keep us this long.
Jacobson is one of 4 members of Parliament in New Zealand right now. The other members are Honourable Poko Sipeli of Liku, Common Role member Richard Hipa, who is still under medical care after a medical evacuation in August, and Common Role member Stanley Kaloni, who went to New Zealand for a family funeral. Honourable Jacobson says that she is aware that Premier Tagilangi has been speaking with Dr. Colin Tukuitonga, who has been advising the government, and that she is confident that if the Dr. Tukuitonga has advised it's safe to resume flights back home, then she is satisfied that it is safe to do so.
We understand, those of us that are waiting to come home, we understand that all this would be subject to what's going on here in New Zealand. Because the whole idea is that we don't actually come with carrying the virus with us. And that's just where we got to be extra cautious. And as long as the Premier is receiving advice from on the ground here by the people who are on the pulse of things, I would be happy with whatever it is that they decide. But I would also be happy knowing that this would be subject to having received that kind of advice.
Air New Zealand's local agent Pelenis Travel has also confirmed that these passengers' return airfares are held in credit until they are ready and have confirmed their return dates. Passengers can change their tickets to that new date without incurring any fees, but if they decide to change it for a second time, fees will be charged. And the Whalefono has confirmed this week that the government had awarded the contract for the conferencing and broadcasting system for the new Whalefono or Whanokepule chambers to a New Zealand company, a contract worth $250,000. The procurement process for this contract, though, has been criticised by some members of the Tenders Board for bypassing the board and for not being transparent, saying that they did not or they were not involved in the procurement process for this contract. The process of fitting the new Parliament building has raised issues with the tender process of the government. Given the lack of a government procurement policy, the process of procuring the internal fittings of Parliament has been done without going through the Cabinet-appointed Tenders Board. According to the Cabinet Parliamentary Services at Whalefono, there were 6 quotations received for this contract, 4 from local businesses and 2 from overseas. This new system is designed to cater for both radio and television, as well as the requirements for the Hansards. The addition of broadcast standard PTZ cameras will provide the Assembly with the capability of live coverage on television as well as live streaming on the internet. According to the Whalefono, the contractor Codem New Zealand is aware of the maintenance requirement and that there will be discussions when the engineers arrive to install the equipment, but frontline maintenance will be someone based on the island. Apparently, this company, Codem New Zealand, also installed the conferencing system for the Whalefono or the Parliament building of Samoa. But members of the tender board have taken issue with the procurement process for this new conferencing system. According to the chairman of the board, Fapoia Kesi, the tenders board had not been involved in the determination or the procurement of the contract for the fittings of the new parliament. Another member of the board, Julie Funaki, says that there really is no point in having a tender board if the government or cabinet continue to make the final decision. In a statement to BCN News, Mrs. Funaki said that it makes no sense and is a mockery of the whole process and the capabilities of the members of the tenders board. Julie Funaki says that she is speaking for herself and not for the board, but she believes that the board was given a mandate to make decisions on government tenders. However, the government has taken that mandate back and ignoring sound decisions made by the tender board. The government's tender board was appointed by Cabinet last year. It is chaired by former Community Affairs Director Fapoia Kesi. Deputy Chair is former Telecom Director Tutuli Haka. Members include Julie Funaki, Fofo Talangi, Tifanga Tupuiliu and Denise Pihingia from the Chamber of Commerce. They provide the Secretariat services to the Tenders Board. Questions as to why the government's Tenders Board was not involved in the determination of contracts for the new Parliament building were sent to the Premier's office earlier this week, but we have yet to receive any response. Niue High School students were the first Pacific-based students to trial the digital exams for NCA levels 1, 2 and 3 this week. John Edangi told BCN News that the trial online exams went without a hitch thanks to their partnership with Telecom Niue, whose technicians were on standby throughout the 3 days.
The exams this week included Digital Information Technology Externals and English Externals for Year 11 students. On day 1, 16 students completed the Digital Information Technology exam online. On day 2, 14 Year 11 students were the first from the schools in Niue and the Cook Islands to trial the English External exams online. On the third day, 18 senior students from years 12 and 13 set their Digital Information Technology Externals online. Throughout the 3 days, telecom technicians were on standby to ensure the smooth running of the exams. Mr. Dangi says that Niue is very fortunate to have this opportunity when schools in New Zealand are having difficulty, especially with the COVID-19 interruptions. He says the school is confident that they have the infrastructure in place to offer digital external examinations, as is evident in the past 2 days.
October is Cancer Awareness Month, according to the Niue Health Department. So you can go and get yourself checked out at the hospital, at the local hospital, or you can seek more information on cancer. There is also a breast screening program for women over 40.
For women over 40 years old, you can go up to the Niue Hospital to the lovely radiographer Mele Mone to get screened for breast cancer. These breast cancer screening days are Tuesdays and Thursdays throughout the month of October. BCN News understands that there is an unusually high number of local women diagnosed with some form of cancer in recent years. The Health Department is working on research as to why this is the case.
That's our news tonight. Remember, it's October tomorrow, so it's Cancer Awareness Month. Inform yourself and get tested, or just visit the Niue Hospital and speak to the health professionals about cancer. And also wear your pink tomorrow, because I understand there's some events happening at the Commercial Centre. But that's our news for tonight. Join us again on Tuesday next week for our bulletin in Wangahau Niue. You have a lovely evening. Good night.